Hello students. Today I will finish what we started in class. So you need this pulled up, your notes for the mid-war years in Germany and Italy. And I'll cover what we did not cover in class. I'll cover that in lecture. So I'm going to pick up right here on number 8. But before I do that, let me show you what you need to do for Russia. So on Classroom, I attached the reading for totalitarian Stalinist Russia. And the worksheet that you got, I don't have a picture of that. It's the worksheet that says totalitarianism on the top. And then it gives you the different categories for how Stalin dominated Russia with his totalitarian communist government. And then on the back side, there's a chart. And you need to work through the reading to help you answer everything on that front and back side. But the chart covers two main economic policies, and you'll find those in the reading, such as the last page here, Stalinist terror and the Great Purges. So follow the directions for the chart, and you'll be good. I included my reading because, like we've talked about, the textbook for the teacher's edition is a little bit different than yours. Yours will work fine if this doesn't work very well, but this is a little more detailed. Next year I'll talk to the publisher about that. Alright, so let's go ahead and start your lecture. We went over the Weimar Republic, instability, Spartacus uprising, Cap Putsch, the revolts, what these revolts revealed about German society, and now we're right here. So you're on number 8. And I'm going to pick up with you from number 8. So it says, describe the overall economy of Europe in the 1920s with 3 words. I'll let you pick out the 3 words. I'll just go over the economy. It's not very good. Please use more descriptive words than I just did. So, European economies as a whole are not very good. The war, remember, was fought on the continent of Europe. So it destroyed the continent of Europe. It also made it very hard to recover afterwards. And remember, after the war ended, empires broke up. So Austrian-Hungarian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, they're divided up, and new countries are created. And you got to figure out, how are we going to trade with these new countries? So the creation of countries like Hungary, Austria, all the countries in Eastern Europe that are created from the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, they make trade more difficult. The U.S. and Japan at this time, they're thriving. They're becoming the world powers and the world leaders in terms of trade. One of the reasons they were highly unimpacted by the European War, because it was fought on the continent of Europe. So here's Europe after 1918, after the war. Like I said, the Austrian-Hungarian Empire is now 5 different countries. The Ottoman Empire has been broken up a little bit, but it still remains intact somewhat. So the landscape again of Europe is changing. Huge number of deaths. The war cause robbed Europe both of producers and consumers. That means there's not people to buy the products, and there's also not people to produce the products. Women made advances during this time period, but after the war, all their labor gains essentially went back to the men. So you got a lot of problems with labor too. Strikes, labor disputes become common. So let me pause there, and I'm going to give you a chance to go back to your document, and then I'll show you. Alright, so I just covered 8, 9, 10, 11. Critical analysis number 2, you're on your own. Answer that question. These are questions that go beyond, right? Critical analysis, they make you think beyond the lecture and come up with your own answers. But you know the answers, you just have to think about it. Use the dates, 1919. Why is Germany suffering so much? It has everything to do with 1919. And then number 12, we're going to pick up with that. So how did British unemployment compare to German unemployment by 1932? Let's look at a couple charts. You read about this. British unemployment, let's track it. So 2%, 1900, very good, very low unemployment rates. It kind of spikes 1910, but not really. By 1920, right around the war's end, it's gotten a little worse in England, but 1929, stock market crashes, the Great Depression hits, and boom, by 1932, British unemployment is at about 15%. Compare that to German unemployment. 1920s, things are pretty good. They have a period of somewhat stable government. Things get worse on in the later 1920s. And then by 1929, when the Great Depression hits all over the world, I said it impacts Germany on a whole nother level because they were depressed, and now they're even more depressed with the Great Depression. By 1932, unemployment is at 30%. So compare that to Britain unemployment, and we see a major difference. German unemployment rates got even higher. They got up to 43% at one point, but by 1932, they're at 30%. The German economy. The basics. The Allies, they demanded their money. So they set up the reparations, the Treaty of Versailles. They weren't getting their money. They meet again in London, and they say, give me my money, Germany. So they charged Germany $31.5 billion to be paid at $500 million per year. If that were to play itself out, they could pay off their reparations in 60 years. That's ridiculous. Germany's shocked, afraid, and mad, and they're very upset. The Treaty of Rapallo, 1922. This is a treaty made between Germany and Russia. And it's an interesting treaty if you think about it, because they're allowing German military officials to work with Trotsky and train the Red Army, and in return, Germany was allowed to secretly keep a large army in Russia. So the German military is training the Red Army, and what Germany gets is a secret army kept in Russia. So this begins a cooperative relationship between Germany and Russia, which would continue with Stalin and Hitler years later. German crisis, 1923. So still, we're talking about reparations. France doesn't get their money, so they invade Germany. It's called the French invasion of the Ruhr. And this is a crisis in Germany. They say, give me my money back. And Nein means no in German, so they invade. France invades, and in response to the mispayment, they're there for a period of time. German workers responded with passive resistance, a general strike in the region, throwing the economy into chaos. They don't like the French being there, so the workers go on strike, and this leads to more chaos in the economy. French invasion. Things get worse for Germany. Inflation, the idea of money and the value of money shrinking, which means each dollar is worth less and less, and you have to pay more and more. So the German mark, their dollar, their currency, had traded at 4 to the dollar in 1914, meaning for every mark you get 1 or you get $4. It traded at 64 to the dollar by January 1921. The value of the German money had essentially become worthless. By November 1923, it took 800 million marks to make $1, meaning essentially German money was now worthless. So the middle class saw their savings wiped out, and when Hitler starts to come in and make promises about improving the economy, people will now listen. So people are using money like these little kids to play with their dogs. They're sweeping it off the streets. They're loading up into barrels. Money became worthless. Here's a look at that inflation. What a cost of bread started out at in 1918. 0 to 63 marks was at 201 billion marks, which nobody could actually pay. So it meant there was no money to buy food. Here's the German mark. Alright, I'm going to take a break and let's check in with your reading again. Alright, checking in with your notes. I covered 13 through 15. Make sure you have those. And number 16, let's get to number 16. So the government, how do they try to help? They try to print more money. That's what they thought would solve the problem, but this actually made inflation worse. The prices continued to rise, and the money became even more worthless. So the government made the problem worse, and the people trust the government even less. Germany's on the brink of revolution all the time because the people don't trust the government, so they're looking to the radical groups for new ideas. Don't worry about this. We talked about this today in class. Enter Hitler, the rise of extremism, because people are looking for new leadership. We talked about his failed coup, the beer hall putsch. Here's what actually happened. We talked about that. The propaganda minister, years later, Joseph Goebbels. explaining the story of how Hitler saved a little German girl on that day, that poor blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl who was going to die, and Hitler saved her life. And it was all a lie, but propaganda worked, and people begin to worship the Nazi Party, more or less. There's the streets where the beer hall putsch actually took place on in Germany, and then Hitler goes to prison. In prison, he writes his most famous work, Mein Kampf, called My Struggle, a famous anti-Semitic work describing the Jews as the reason for all of Germany's problems and the reason they lost World War I. Now, to understand the popularity of this book, by 1933, it sold 1 million copies in Germany alone. So people are reading the book. What's the appeal? Anti-Semitism already strong. We know that. We've been studying the history of anti-Semitism, the Dreyfus Affair, the expulsion of the Jews from Russia. All these things indicate that anti-Semitism is not just a German thing, it's all around the world, sadly. And this also, his work speaks to people's nationalistic mentality. Germany is great and should be great again. He talks about all sorts of German history in the book, and he really gives the people a reason for Germany's problem in the Jews. It's the idea of a scapegoat, right? People want to know why they failed, and he gives them a reason. In general, by 1933, Hitler's a very popular figure. People are going to read his work because he's one of the more popular writers of the time in Germany. So there's another reason. His popularity has risen. His imprisonment, here's Hitler in prison. It is noted that Hitler was treated very well in prison. He could have guests. He was a popular figure even in 1924, and he was treated very well in his 7 months in prison. So why the rise of extremism? We talked a little bit about it, but people are very dissatisfied with the Weimar Republic, with the government. They're looking for new leadership, and there's a failed system. The democratic capitalist system that existed, it's failed. They're open to new radical ideas more so than ever before. We're not going to end there today. We're going to pick up right here. Hold on one second. Let me check in with. So we're on number 21. What was the Dawes Plan? Which means we're going to have to make this a two-part lecture. Let's carry on. Here we go. So, the Dawes Plan, what was it, and what changes did it create for the German economy? The Dawes Plan was this. It's named after the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, who mediated the plan. What it did was lowered reparation payments. That's the bottom line. France agreed to get out of Germany. That's the second part of the plan. And this, for a brief time, eased the financial burden for Germany. It made Germans a little happier, but not entirely. Pause right there. Okay, let's finish 23 through 25 in this lecture, then we'll get to the rise of Hitler. So, who was elected president in 1925? What was his fulfillment policy? Hindenburg is elected president in 1925. He'll remain president until 1933. Hitler becomes chancellor, and he's able to basically control him. His fulfillment policy was this. He tried to fulfill the terms of the Treaty of Versailles and be a good citizen of the world. He wanted to gain respect for Germany and show compassion for the world and his people. Did it work? Well, not so much. Don't worry about this for the notes. Germany's trying to become a good world citizen. They're invited to join the League of Nations, that idea that Woodrow Wilson had in the Treaty of Versailles. They're allowed to negotiate the eastern borders, and they kind of just try to do the right thing. Doesn't really work out once Hitler takes power. In 1928, they outlawed war as an instrument of national policy. So, based on this pact that was signed by German leadership, it says, also the U.S., Japan, and most European nations signed it, it's a statement against war. Never again. So that was the Kellogg-Brand Pact. 1929, the U.S. stock market crashes. Don't worry about the notes up here. This is what happened in 1929. This prompted an economic depression in America, but followed quickly in Europe by 1930 and the whole world. And in 1931, the most important bank, the Creditanstalt, if I said that right, the Austrian bank, most important bank in Europe, crashed, taking with it what remained of the European economy. So after the U.S. stock market crash and the U.S. bank crash, remember that happened in 1931, the European banks crash. We'll call that the end of this lecture, and we will pick up lecture number 2 with Germany and the rise of Hitler.